Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome back to the Weekend Wellness Hour show. Very excited to be back. And today we have a special guest, Leah Benson, who is a psychotherapist out of Florida, who I was connected with through Anthony DeNoble, who was one of our guests earlier this year. And very excited to speak with her because she uses a specific modality called bioenergetic analysis to help people with mental health concerns and through their mental health journey. And considering the work I do, there's some commonalities, and I was very excited to meet with her and then to have her on today. So thank you so much for joining us, Leah.
Thanks for having me. It's really good to be here.
Yeah. So I'm curious, can you share with us first, what is your background? I didn't go through it because you have so many degrees and accreditations that you're well experienced in the mental health field. So please share with us a little bit about that.
All right. Well, so I got a master's degree in counseling back in 2001. And that was sort of not too long after the beginning of my own sort of psychotherapy journey, which began in 2000 with a psychoanalysis. So I'm going to kind of blend, my training and my own experience in therapy. Because they really kind of go together to make me sort of, they go along together really in parallel as giving me what I need to do what I do. So, gosh, that got a little convoluted, but anyway, so moving along, I started, working in agencies and, practicing my skills as a therapist and at the same time sort of continuing my own 10-year journey of psychoanalysis, and began in 2005 to have a private practice after I got my license. And so really kind of doing that thing, one-to-one with people, not going into homes and working with families, which is what I had been doing. But really applying the concepts of psychoanalysis that I had experienced and learned in my own research and in my own experience, kind of after the graduate school work. And I started to see when I would work with people that they just kind of were not getting in touch with what was going on in their bodies. They were understanding things, but not really connecting with feelings. And so I started to think, how do I help people kind of connect to their body? So it was really a 2-year process of trying to discover how to help people go from, just thinking to moving energy in their bodies and connecting the stories and releasing feelings and really just making it a whole mind body process. And I randomly, through a situation like this, where someone was being interviewed, sharing about something called bioenergetic analysis. And so, I was immediately intrigued and went down that rabbit hole and ended up in a training program for bioenergetic analysis, about 2 weeks after, really diving right in and spending 4 years, doing my own work and getting into my body. Even though I had spent, as I said, 10 years in psychoanalysis, this even in my own body, there were insights and ways that I could learn about myself and sort of tweak my functioning in my relationships and in, in my head. And so again, 4 years of learning that and learning the concepts of it, this body mind psychotherapy called bioenergetic analysis, which really was rooted in the beginnings with psychoanalysis. It was developed by a guy who was one of Freud's kind of colleagues at the time, his contemporaries. And so I immediately began helping people get into their bodies using the techniques of bioenergetic analysis and really seeing results and like really having people have real shifts that lasted by working with their bodies at the same time as kind of talking through something that was going on in their life or something that they're trying to make right mentally. And so, that training was finished in 2017. And since then, I've just really been I wrote a book about it. I was so excited about it in 2015. And so since then, really just trying to share the word about the effectiveness of this body-based psychotherapy called bioenergetic analysis, which is really kind of about watching the energy functions in the body. Where do you spend your energy? When do you conserve your energy? When does your energy go away and you don't have use of it? And how is that connected to the stories in your life? And what exercises can I teach you that allow you to apply a different energy status, we'll say, in your body when you get involved in something that reminds you of, a story from your past that you would originally deal with in your body in a particular way, you would like retract. Whereas if you know now that you do that and you're in a situation that's a reminder, and that's not the best way to deal with the situation, that you can use the exercises that you have practiced and find the energy to deal with that situation in a way that you in the past haven't been able to do so. Like you would not say something, you would just go away. So now you've practiced saying no or having your say, just literally vocalizing in these bioenergetic exercises, which I can explain more about, in a bit. But that you have this capacity to speak your truth in a way that you didn't before, literally by using your body in a way that you hadn't been able, not just thinking about doing it, but actually doing it, practicing. So that was a very long explanation, and I hope it answered your question.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of break it down a little bit. So when we experience things in our past, like let's say we had a specific event in our past that's maybe it's a little bit more traumatic, do we assign a certain kind of energy to that event? And as we experience it, we kind of use a certain amount of energy. But then if we want to go back and reflect on it, we may not have the energy to actually deal with it and process it and walk through that emotional memory. Is that kind of what you're saying as well? Or am I a little bit off there?
Well, so right. So let's just say if there was this experience that we reacted to in a particular way, which I think that's what you just said. Yeah.
Yep.
So if something in our current lives reminds us of that past experience, our natural way to deal with it is to do it in the same way we did, especially if that was a way we sort of typically reacted to a situation. Okay. Right. And so being able to see that now as what's happening in a similar situation, first off, you have to develop the ability to see that you're doing that as a sort of characteristic reaction. And once you can see that, then you can apply a different way of dealing with it rather than the sort of automatic, unconsciously motivated way. So that's actually, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're basically going to change how you respond to future events. So is there a component, and I don't know if this is the correct modality in mental health, treatment, is there a component where you can go back and reprocess an old event, but change how your response is so it's no longer a trigger? Is that part of bioenergetic analysis, or would that be something else?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so it being a trigger so let me clarify, because I can answer it without asking you this, but I think it'll bring a little more light to it if I ask this question. So when you say it being a trigger, tell me exactly what you mean, because
Sure. Like, let's say I had a horrible car accident 10, 12 years ago, and it was on an icy road, and I just got back from Iceland where I was driving on the icy road. Being on the icy road, what could have been a trigger for me, because I hadn't driven on that bad of ice until, back in 2008, when I had the accident, actually the same exact day. So driving on this icy road in Iceland, I remembered it and it was a trigger, but I kept myself calm, but it could have turned out very differently. So that for me was a trigger.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. And to say reprocessing it, meaning, let's just say being in that memory, we'll say. And of course it begins with noticing what the reaction is, but that in this situation where you're not actually in it, the idea would be to reprocess it before you're there again, the way you were, and not having a trigger, is that, yeah, you revisit that place and move the energy in your body differently from a conscious perspective, in essence, so that the sort of, we'll say, triggered body reaction begins, and you move your body in a certain way, or basically, in essence, retell the story, and or and it could be in a car accident, or a car situation, it's a little harder than with another person. You could sort of enact the way that you would now, or would have liked to. Yeah, you're smiling, so I think you know what I'm talking about. You redo the incident, so to speak, and allow your body to experience another way of having had that experience.
Right, and I can understand that, and I know our body tends to like to stores emotions as well, from those experiences. So is that when you go through exercises and a person goes through an experience of this type of analysis, are you also looking at different areas of the body where something is stored?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, so bioenergetic analysis has a very sort of key part of it, which is the 5 character styles. So each of those character styles sort of holds energy, or moves energy, or compacts energy, or isn't able to hold energy in certain areas of the body. And those are sort of, those are ways that we look at how the body reacts automatically, and where the body sort of, as you say, really holds feeling, or holds energy, or stores memory, that sort of thing. Those are the body attitudes that are a reflection of the memories, right? And so, yeah, so that's just a way for us, part of what happens is I teach you about what I see in your body, so where you're holding the energy, and what comes to your mind, noticing, and how, when you move that energy, or let's just say I ask you to exaggerate something I see in your shoulders, and I make you hold it there. What does this bring to your mind? And we use those stories that come to your mind to help us understand, what is this in your history? Right? Or what is this associated with in something in your history? Or to have you stand, hunched, and like you're holding a weight of 1,000 pounds, and not forcing you, but, sort of asking you to stay in that until it gets to a place where it makes you want to make a sound, or tell me a story, or move your body with an impulse. And then we use that information as information for you about, how you do you, and how maybe ultimately that is affecting you in your present day, and ways you might do that differently. It's all about bringing awareness.
Awesome. Oh, that's wonderful. So when a person comes to you to have this type of analysis, can you walk us through that type of experience? You kind of give us a little bit. Is it an hour? Is it a longer experience than that? When they first come in, do you go through their mental health journey prior to meeting you? What does it look like?
Right. So in essence, so usually what I ask is, what brought you here? What are you looking for? Right. And so, and I guess that's more in the weeds. So let me just say overarchingly, like, I don't have a particular number of times that I think people need to come, or, have a visit. I have helped people in as few as 3 sessions, and I have worked with people for 6 years. So what I can say is that, when a person has like 1 or 2 things that are troubling to them, the average number of times I see someone is 13, right? To really kind of work through and use now many things determine whether that's a possibility or not, including your past mental health history, your past relationship history, all of that stuff, which I do, not in any kind of systematic, intense way, but, gather a bit of your history, because what I need to understand is how your history informs your present. Because, that's how our brain works, right? It uses past history to, give us what we need to make the decisions in the moment. So, so then we sort of take that information, and with the goals that the person has in mind, teach them ways to build awareness, teach them ways to bring their energy up. If it's too low, bring their energy down. If it's too high, various different ways to. There's so many ways. This is the work of the bioenergetic exercise of bioenergetic analysis.
Okay.
So once that happens, then we start sort of, they'll come in with, this is when this symptom occurred. And, I sort of talk them through knowing their history, what might be happening, in that moment, what are they, and helping them think about what exercises to apply in that moment in the future to avoid sort of, let's say, exploding on a work, like it's the person who owns a business exploding on their employees. Because, knowing that although that can be effective, it's not always effective, but it's all I ever do. So how do I take that energy and sort of shift it down in a way that doesn't, ruin the rest of the day for me and ruin my relationship with my employee?
So when you're going through this, like, for example, this person that's exploding on the employees, as you're doing the analysis and you're doing stuff like, if you say lift your shoulders or hunch over, do people typically have more than one type of habit that results in a certain emotional experience? Is there, like, besides shoulder hunching, maybe they suck up their gut, maybe they're constantly tapping their foot? Do we have 10 or 15 that we each do, or is there typically like a predominant one or two?
Oh, that's I would say there's almost two ways to answer that. In an overarching way, there are one or two things that we all do. That would be the sort of overarching pattern of our character, right? So if we have the sort of dreamer creative person, then their thing is to kind of go dreamy, and then you have the communicator who they just want everything to be fair, and then you have the person who's like endures, and so overarchingly that there will be like a go-to for a person across the board, but it's not fair to apply. Like, none of us are that simple. So so depending on the situation and what has traditionally worked, in our history, if it was one thing, we're going to go to that one thing more often. But clearly we have different because our choices of reactions, at least early on in life, developed along with our ability to control our muscular system. How much ability we had to control our arms and legs really early on. And then, how much we could do on our own at, 2 years of age, and our bowels, and, the concepts, controlling the idea of concepts, all of these things. So our natural go-tos for certain things, maybe, well, I don't want to get too complicated, but our natural go-tos are connected with the reactions that we had developmentally around certain things. And clearly that gets more and more complicated the more control we have over our bodies. But if you look in that first, 3-5 years of life, about what physical control a child has over their body, that is a big part of the ways that they react. We all react typically to various situations in our lives that feel overwhelming, things that feel overwhelming.
And how much do our parents or caregivers play a role in that when we're seeing how they react? Does that get imprinted on us as much as kind of our physical movements of our body?
Absolutely. And I would say the physical movements of our body are directly affected by the reactions that we get based on the physical movements of our bodies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's all intertwined, and there's not really one solution, as with most things when it comes to health.
Exactly.
All right. So let's say, a person comes in, they're talking to them about their health, their mental health history, kind of what's their trigger, why they're there. and you go through this analysis, and as you're bringing awareness to a person, are you helping them keep track of these different habits they have in terms of reaction to different events? And then do you break down each habit one by one and give them specific exercises to help them either become more aware of that habit or to change that habit?
Absolutely. Okay. So the awareness part is a sort of, there's not a direct exercise for that, but it's,
Okay.
So of course, obviously starting with awareness
Mhm.
to build the awareness of, and to get better at being aware when it happens. I suggest people do any kind of meditation. I happen to really like what Dan Siegel developed in the Wheel of Awareness meditation, in that it's just so robust and gets you to really focus on so many different things in a very methodical way. So Wheel of Awareness, right? It's got these 4 quadrants, and it's just a really good way to develop the capacity to be better at noticing, at being aware consciously of anything, including what's going on in yourself.
Okay.
So there's that aspect of it. And then once they notice, and they often know, usually a yeller is usually a yeller. A person who can't have their, or an explosive person is usually an explosive person.
Mhm.
And the other vice versa, likewise, is going to retract, is going to, keep silent, these sorts of things. And so the exercises for the person who is an exploder, there's a couple of different things. First off is, if there's so much energy to spend, that you need to know that you've got to dial down that amount of energy that you have to spend before you go into a big meeting, because you're going to be so excited, and that can go from excitement to anger immediately. So if you just dial down by doing a particular exercise, like it's called pounding, that's a really good one. Anything to move. Going to the gym is effective, right? But there are certain bioenergetic movements that really kind of contract and relax and stretch, like big swaths of muscle in the body. It's from an overhead pounding that gives a nice arch backwards, and then boom, dropping into the legs. So you're grounding that intensity and spending some of the energy that you have.
Okay.
Right. So that's one. You can twist a towel. If you have tension in your face, you can bite on a towel. And for the people who don't speak their minds, is literally just having them practice exercises of literally vocalizing, like holding your hands out and saying the word no, 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 which sounds, it feels really corny. It kind of makes you laugh.
Mhm.
But the reality is that it's like anything you practice. It's really just about making the movement so that it becomes something that you have done, that you have at hand. Obviously you have to dial in all the meanings of, what if I speak my mind? And, in my past, that meant that, I was punished, or I was isolated, or, this is what keeps these things come up in the stories. But practicing, this is why it's helpful to do it with someone, right? Like, these are things you can do on your own, but to have, say, a therapist who can say, yeah, of course, this is what's coming up for you. This is connected with an old story that was very painful. And that's okay. I'm here to honor your experience and give you the opportunity to have out whatever feelings you have about that. And then you can practice having your voice and saying no, and not having that bring up this very painful old stuff.
Got it. Oh, that's neat. Yeah, because when you practice, it's like you're learning how to use it for your advantage in the future, instead of it being a trigger for your past. That's pretty neat. Well, that's wonderful. And how long, and obviously this is probably different for everyone, but how quickly do people start to feel a change or a shift that they can start to implement this new meaning of these little habits?
Well, I would say, like I said, I can sort of think of 2 different folks. One who worked with me for around 13 sessions. And, within 3 to 4 sessions, this is once a week, he's really it's revving up, and he gets, and by 3 or 4, he's going. And really by the end, he's like, wow, that was amazing.
That's neat. Oh.
Yeah. and he returned, I think, in a year and a half later, just to kind of like, kind of dial in on a few things. It really, he visited me 3 times, and he's like, oh yeah, okay, I remember.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's the more expressive, kind of type person.
Mhm.
And then there's someone else who, I've worked with her for about a year now. And I've worked with her twice a week. And for her, it was about speaking her, having her voice and speaking her mind, and, feeling like she wasn't going to kill someone by speaking her mind, which is what she felt like, just sort of, which goes back to her own family and that sort of thing. So I would say she was very, very depressed when she came to see me initially, just like really very, very depressed. And within it was about 8 to 12 weeks, she was really kind of taking on the doing the exercises and finding value in them, which in her case was breathing exercise, deepening the breathing, screaming and feeling the charge of, what screaming can do for you, to really charge you up, and, standing and like stomping the feet and like feeling the vibrancy of her body. That, it's really, and there have been ups and downs during the time, but really it took about, 8 to 10 to 12 weeks to really just have her, which again, that was twice a week. But it's about, I'd say 8 to 12 weeks. You really are, and you're immediately, like within 3 to 4 weeks, if you're doing the exercises, you're really getting a lot of benefit. And this is, like 10 minutes a day.
That's not bad.
Yeah. Like bending backwards over a ball and breathing in light, slow, and deep into the lower lungs and inflating the abdomen, or more intensified breathing with some, exhaling with sound, or as I said, the pounding that I have mentioned, which some people are, most people are tentative about initially.
Yeah.
But really building in these charging and these grounding and calming exercises for like really no more than 10 minutes a day, and then a sort of very short version of this wheel of awareness, it really within 3 to 4 weeks, people are really feeling it, and by 8 to 12 weeks, they're really dialing in what works for them and seeing things about themselves, and putting into practice the exercises that really get kind of tailored, for you, depending on what really works for you. And they are tailored, and they're also very similar for everyone.
Right.
It's really, yeah.
That's incredible. So you mentioned depression is one, anger is another. What are some other kind of conditions that would draw people to this type of work?
Right. Anxiety, traumatic experiences that create intrusive thinking and cyclical thinking. And I would say, those are, and I don't want to say, I want to say like, those are definitely the things that this is helpful for sure.
Yeah. How about something like panic, where someone's having panic attacks? Is this something that you can figure out what's going on to help change the energy so the panic attacks either lessen or go away? Or does that require something more?
Well, because a panic attack is really, it's a sort of that it's a way too much energy being supplied. If we think of it, like, forget the story may come, it may not. And if the story comes, we're going to have probably a lot quicker ability to kind of get you out of having that energy, way too much energy than you need in any given moment. But that panic is, I have enough energy to solve a problem that I don't have a problem to solve right now. So in essence, your body is in total spinal sympathetic activation, right? Fight or flight. Yeah. And you don't have a problem to solve. So, I mean, so yes, in that, the exercises that we teach in bioenergetic analysis, will help you dial down what's happening in your body, really, like turn on the parasympathetic. That's the very first thing we do. right? Because obviously that's the worst part of this whole situation. And not wanting it to continue is the work of, okay, what is the context here? What comes to my mind? This is the sort of psychoanalytic therapy part of the journey, is understanding the stories associated with that and following that rabbit hole, so that they don't just grab you, these surges of energy that are not useful to you in the moment.
Yeah. And when someone goes through a session and they're practicing these exercises, are there any side effects or a recovery period, like we'll say an hour or two, or they need to lie down or just have some quiet time? Is that something that's consistent?
Yeah, it's, because of the nature and of certainly in the beginning of the exercises, they are the thing. It's not like they are calming and they are charging, and there is not particularly any intensity of anything that comes up that requires any kind of recovery time, we'll say.
Okay.
I mean, obviously afterwards, integration is going on and your brain is sort of taking that all in and, mixing it all up. And, but there's no need based on what you're doing for any kind of a sort of recovery.
Okay. Well, that's good. And why would people use this type of modality in the therapy world versus like talk therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy? What makes this unique?
Well, with the focus, I mean, there's a lot of body psychotherapies out there these days, but I would say based on the difference between cognitive therapy and this is that, you can't leave the body out of mental health. They're just not separate. And so to focus on what's going on in your body really facilitates the process of getting what you want faster. I mean, applying there is great value in cognitive behavioral therapy. I mean, without question, concepts are such an important thing to dial in, but I think that they are applied on top of the energy in the body, which is either high or low and feels pleasant or unpleasant. And that, what story am I making out of that energy in this context that I'm in? Does it apply or not? Because if not, what do I want to do instead? How do I want to, shift my understanding of this energy in my body so that it doesn't feel so unpleasant? Or how do I want to understand this discomfort? Is this, this unpleasant feeling in my body? Is this the old story I used to apply to myself in this context? I feel like I'm getting kind of far afield, but, so it's the stories applied to what's going on in the body. And so if you leave out, half of the equation, well, you're really just, I don't know, you're going to get something, but it's not going to be as efficient and effective as combining mind and body.
Yeah, and I can see that because it's hard to just separate things apart and say, like when I look at someone and they come to me, they have some type of pain, and let's say they have shoulder pain. It's like, you're not a shoulder. Your mind is involved in your shoulder, your toes involved in your shoulder, your emotions are involved in your shoulder, you're everything. So you can't just say you're a blob and we're going to fix that blob. You're everything. So I can see how this can work it, well with other aspects. So when someone comes to work with you, do you bring in other aspects of mental health treatments into a session, or do people come and say, well, I just want bioenergetic analysis and that's it? Can you kind of weave some of the other stuff into it?
I think it's impossible not to weave other things into it. I think that every sort of tradition and every modality has something to contribute. I think the foundation is this bioenergetic analysis, really resting on the foundation of psychoanalysis, and that there's no way to really keep anything, I think the behaviorists try that, like it's just behavior and we're just going to focus on behavior, but I just don't think that's possible. So yeah, absolutely weaving in other modalities is it's always happening. It's impossible for it to not happen,
Yeah.
at least the way I work.
Right. And, we want to help people the best that we can. So if we can use more than one tool, it's always more beneficial.
Yep.
So is there anything that we didn't cover with this topic that you want to bring in? I kind of asked you different questions, but is there anything with bioenergetic analysis that we didn't touch on that might help someone get a more full picture of what it is?
I'm actually going to say, based on, where I was going with energy level and pleasantness and unpleasantness, I do want to say that, the great thing about this whole modality, and as it turns out, right, so the initial body psychotherapy was this Reichian therapy that was, this colleague of Freud's who created this, Reichian therapy of breathing. And he, in 1933, said something like, one day psychiatry is going to be able to see the human, sort of mental function, et cetera, in terms of simple energy function. And so fast forward through Lowen and bioenergetic analysis, kind of getting the patients up off the couch in therapy because they were lying down breathing with Reich, and he moved them into standing. And now there is this theory of constructed emotions, which kind of back to 1933. So Lisa Feldman Barrett is a real top emotion researcher in the world, and she created through the science, the theory of constructed emotion. And that is that we have this baseline of energy level and valence, which is pleasantness or unpleasantness, and that it is those simple energy functions that the concepts of emotion are applied. And so I was sort of alluding to that a little bit earlier. And so it's really cool to sort of see this full circle in this bioenergetic analysis of the science really backing up where this bioenergetic, I like to call it metabolic perspective of mental health, that emotions are really concepts that we apply to a certain energy level and a pleasantness or unpleasantness in a particular context. And that is informed by our past history. And so when you can say to someone, what's happening energetically in your body and how does it feel? What's the story you're applying to that? And how can you apply a different story? Can you move that energy and make it more pleasant? What would you like to do to change this? Are you trying to make a point with someone with this So it's a very, it's in its simplicity, it is so valuable and gets away from too much, because I think psychotherapy had a tendency to be very convoluted. I really do. And so this return to simple energy function, and then the complication in the concepts, so that our physical bodies are not the complication. The complication can be sorted out, but we don't leave either out. Yeah. So I feel like I wanted to end with that like very simple explanation, because it comes from this history of a lot of, complicated ideas. But ultimately, it's about energy level and pleasantness or unpleasantness and the stories that we are applying to that physical experience in any context in any given moment. So easy to understand and start to pick apart for yourself.
And I like that you mentioned a couple of questions. Like, what are you trying to achieve with this energy? What stories are you telling yourself? I could see people could have a list of questions that as they start to experience something, like, okay, let me look at my questions. What do I want to happen here? What story is coming up for me as I respond to this? Like, you could have these questions that can really have someone pause, and then they can make a more conscious choice on how they're going to choose to respond to the new event happening. So I could see how it could be really beneficial for someone's future reactions.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's incredible. This is wonderful. And so you do this with people both in person and virtually, is that correct?
I do. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And so how can people reach you?
Well, let's see. I have leahbensontherapy.com. You can email me at leah@leahbensonTherapy. I have Instagram, Leah Benson Coaching Therapy, Leah Benson Consulting.com.
You're all over.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's great. And I will include that information. So I really appreciate you taking your time this Saturday to join us and to share with us. And just really thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Amy.
You're welcome. And thank you all for joining us today. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Take care, and we'll see you next weekend. Bye now.